to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into Pater for a one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. Today, Michael and myself are here to answer your Colts questions. We were going to record this last Thursday. Of course, you know, the Carson Wentz trade news broke, so it kind of derailed our plans a little bit, derailed some of the questions that we were going to answer. So we are doing now an updated Colts Q&A after the Carson Wentz trade. So apologies if you sent in a question and it isn't relevant anymore. Maybe that includes trading up or looking at other quarterback options. We are just discussing the most relevant Colts topics for you guys moving forward into the offseason. I was looking today, Michael, the free agency period, we are less than a month away, right? It starts on March 17th is when free agency opens. Super excited about that. And obviously the draft is coming up very soon as well. So there's a lot of things coming up very, very soon. Thank you so much for all the questions that you have for us. We'd love to do this more often. But with that being said, Michael, go ahead and take us away, man, with the first question. I think we're starting with the questions from YouTube. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. We're starting on YouTube. We are actually going to be a little familiarized with this first question. It's coming from Dylan Green. He says, what do you think about signing Joe Haeg in the offseason to start at left tackle? So a familiar face back in Indy. What do you think, Cody?
Very much a familiar face. It's very interesting. Like, I didn't blame Joe Haeg for wanting to leave last offseason and going and protecting Tom Brady. Ultimately, he's a Super Bowl champion, and that was probably a decent choice for him overall in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, he wasn't a starter, so I totally understand that. The question about him being left tackle, though, you know, I don't think if the Colts brought him in, it would be to be a left tackle. You know, I don't think it would be the starting left tackle, I should say. So I think if they bring him in, it's more of a depth piece again. And at that point, it's like, well, why wouldn't you re-sign with a team that was just in the Super Bowl, right? I mean, but from a depth standpoint, sure, I would love to bring back Joe Haeg. I think he provides a lot of quality depth at offensive tackle and also pretty much any position, right? He's played basically every position on the line. So I wouldn't mind bringing him back. But the question is, does he want to come back, especially riding a Super Bowl victory?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I wouldn't want to start him if we do bring him back at all because, you know, I think we should invest in a younger guy who's going to have a lot more years than Joe Haeg, who will actually be a little bit cheaper than Joe Haeg as well, signing him on. But, you know, you're right. If we're going to get him for depth and his versatility, I'd absolutely love it because the guys know him. They already have some chemistry with him throughout the past couple of years. So, yeah, I'd be great with the depth, but not to start.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Now we're going to move on to Justin Whitmer. Do you think Ben Banagoo will turn into a great pass rusher?
Ooh, that's a loaded question right there.
And he did say great, so you have to like go with his premise here.
So what do you think classifies as great in your mind?
For me, if we're looking at the great pass rushers right now, I'm thinking of Khalil Mack. I'm thinking of Shaquille Barrett, JPP, Frank Clark. Those guys, maybe not the elite. I mean, you can consider Khalil Mack elite, but like the elite right now to me is TJ Watt.
Oh, yeah.
But like the second tier, that great combination.
Gotcha. Yeah. So not quite elite. Okay. I gotcha. Yeah. So that, I mean, obviously double-digit sacks every year consistently. Oh, gosh. I mean, they got a long way to go with Ben Banagoo. I mean, there's a reason he was a healthy scratch this last year, pretty much the entire season. You know, especially because, like, you know, the defensive end position, like, it was pretty crowded as well. But, you know, saying that was, I think, if you look at the defensive line and really the defense in general, you could probably say outside of maybe corner, edge rusher is the number one need. And maybe it even trumps corner, honestly. So, you know, that being said, with the kind of need there at defensive end, Ben Banagoo, certainly he has to. This is a big year for Ben Banagoo. It gives us, we've talked about it, Tyquan Lewis vibes from a year ago, right? When he was basically the same way, where he was missing games due to being a healthy scratch because it came to active practice, right? That's what Matt Eberflus was saying. Right. We heard very similar things from Matt Eberflus about Ben Banagoo. So I can't, you know, it's hard for me to just say boom, he's going to be a great pass rusher. I certainly think, I'll say this, Justin, I certainly think he has the traits and the physical ability to become a great pass rusher. I'll say that. There's so many factors, though, that need to happen for Ben Banagoo to become that. And we know, like Chris Ballard has said, right, like pass rushers take time. Some of these young guys, they take longer than others, right? Not every guy's going to come in and be a Quentin Nelson or a Darius Leonard right away. Some of these guys, especially we've seen with the pass rushers, they take some time, right? Tyquan Lewis by no means is like a great player, but he definitely played a lot better in his last year than he did his first couple of years, right? So I think with Ben Banagoo, the key thing here is patience with him. And, you know, if it happens the same time, same thing happens this year, I could maybe see the Colts trying to find a different option there and maybe moving on from him. But, you know, saying that, I certainly think, Justin, to go back to your question, a lot of factors have to happen, but he certainly has the traits and the physical ability to become that if he continues to work, continues to put the work in, continues to work with Robert Mathis and all those guys. I think the traits are there and the physical ability is there. That's for sure. I mean, there's a reason he was taken in the second round, right? He's got some raw talent. He's just got to refine his craft here, work with Brian Baker, defensive line coach, and figure out. I mean, he did wonders with Tyquan Lewis. He did wonders with some of these other guys. Maybe next year he'll do some wonders with Ben Banagoo. We'll see. But yeah, that's kind of my answer to the question.
Yeah, Justin, it's going to be tough for me to say he's going to be great, but there is a lot of potential. Cody just mentioned it. We did take him in the second round. It was either him or Kari Willis, I remember, that they were thinking of, like, at least there was a film room discussion of thinking of either, or no, I believe it was either Okereke or Banagoo. And they were like, you know, depending on who they wanted to take, and clearly they took Banagoo first. And so they had obviously some faith in him, and they still most likely do have that faith. It's just going to take some time. And luckily, we did see a successful situation with Tyquan, and it could be the similar situation. We just got to wait and see. Now we're going to move on to Kenneth Heumann. What do you think about Paris Campbell, and what do you expect from him, obviously, if he stays healthy coming into next season?
First off, thank you for the question, Kenneth. I think we saw a little snippet of what could be with Paris Campbell in that first game.
He was good.
He led the Colts in receiving, right? He was a weapon in that Jacksonville game. Now, I get it, Jacksonville's not a very good team, but we saw that even in 2019 a little bit, right? When Paris Campbell was right, when he was healthy, he was a playmaker waiting to happen. So there is that caveat. Will he stay healthy, right? I don't think it's much of he's injury prone. I just think it's been very unfortunate injuries the last couple of years. Maybe you could point to, in 2019, you could point to like he just wasn't physically in shape. This last year was just a freak type of thing, right?
That was tough.
In my opinion, with Paris Campbell, he is a weapon, man. You can use him just anywhere you want. We saw him do end arounds. We saw him, get screens. You can use him in so many ways. I mean, he's got that blazing speed. So I think Paris Campbell, man, he's a weapon if he's healthy. And so in this caveat, if he does stay healthy, I think he is lightning in a bottle right now. He's, Nyheim Hines and him, man, they are going to be kryptonite to defenses, honestly. I really think so. He's so talented. Like, it's a bummer that these 2019 class, just a lot of these guys haven't quite lived up to where their draft type was, especially that second round quite yet. But the talent is there, right? The talent is there. And if anybody can get talent out of some of these guys, it's the Colts right now with their coaching staff. So, yeah, if Paris Campbell stays healthy, he's shown that he can be a very effective playmaker. So I expect big things out of Paris Campbell if he can fully stay healthy this year.
If I can guarantee if he stays fully healthy, he plays 16 games, he's getting over 900 yards. I can guarantee
all purpose, clearly. Yeah, I think so.
No question. Maybe even 1,000. And so you're right. I haven't seen anyone as fast as him since maybe – obviously Tyreek Hill's maybe a little bit faster, but when Paris Campbell's out there and he's blazing, there's no stopping him.
I know, yeah.
I love seeing it. And so you're right. He's basically like a mini TY kind of mixed with like a Deshaun Jackson type who can pretty much do everything. Just the Harris, I hate when people are saying he's too injury prone because you're right. 2019 was not the best season for him. I don't think he was ready at the start. Yeah. But it was a freak accident. And it was Harrison Smith, one of the hardest hitting safeties that we've seen in my lifetime. And so it was just a freak accident. I'm rooting for him, and I hope that he can get back in shape.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was just going to say, man, in that first game, he was unguardable. I mean, you could not stop Paris Campbell. So that gives me hope that he will turn into that weapon if, like we said, he stays fully healthy, which is a big if right now because, I mean, we can say he's not injury prone, but, I mean, facts speak for itself. How many games has he played in 2 years? I mean, I think it's a fair point there. But, yeah, we can move on to the next one. Sorry about that.
No worries. But we can talk about Paris Campbell all day.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Zane Smith is talking about what do you think the chances are, and if we get him, the price of landing Orlando Brown Jr. are. So the price and chance on Orlando.
All right, I'll start with the price. So I think it's going to take a first-round pick to get Orlando Brown. He's one of the best offensive tackles in the league. But I'll just say this, Zane. I think it's very low the Colts get Orlando Brown, and I'll explain why. I think the Colts like his talent. Obviously, you need an offensive tackle. But for me, it's a couple reasons. First off, he's going to cost a lot of money, right? He's going to want an extension. You're already paying Ryan Kelly, one of the highest paid centers in the league. You're going to have to pay Quentin Nelson the same way. Same with Braden Smith, right? So there's all these guys you're going to have to pay. And number two, this offensive tackle class is really darn good. So I would rather go in the draft and get a guy on his rookie deal for 4 or 5 years. And you can pay some of these guys while also having it. You know, I know it's a little bit less of a slam dunk sure thing right away, right, with an offensive rookie at tackle. But saying that, I still like that option over getting a guy like Orlando Brown because of the contract, right? If Orlando Brown was still on his rookie contract for a couple more years, I might be changing my tune a little bit. But the fact is he's going to want to get paid, and we just can't afford to pay all these guys, right? And this is like why, you know, I've been saying, like, people have been asking, why doesn't Ballard go after more guys? Well, he has recently, but kind of got to think about these. There's some of these superstars you've drafted, you got to pay, right? And so I think that's why. But Zane, I appreciate the question, man. It's a very good question. There's been a lot of talk around him. At first, I was on the Orlando Brown hype train, like trade for this guy, but looking at it now, it makes a lot of sense. You just can't pay everybody top of their position. It's just not logical, right? It's just not going to happen. So I appreciate the question, though. All right, we can move on now to Sassy. Should the Colts try to get J.J. Watt?
Okay. So now this is someone I was going to say for Orlando Brown. I'd honestly rather sign like a cheaper veteran or definitely draft like what you were going to say because his price tag is just going to be a little too much because of what we just did with Carson Wentz. We know that we're going to have to pay him now and take on his contract. J.J. Watt, however, I'm willing to pay that man whatever he wants. I would have the best time watching J.J. Watt and DeForest Buckner play with each other on the same line, including Grover Stewart, including maybe if we get Justin Houston back. Like, just think about that for a second. If we did have Justin Houston, J.J. Watt, Grover Stewart, and DeForest Buckner. I understand it's probably not likely. The Colts are interested, as been a couple reports have been saying. But I don't know if J.J. Watt wants to go to the Colts. If I was J.J., I'd probably want to go lean towards the Steelers, but they just don't have enough money.
All right.
So if he wants to say, screw you, Houston, he's going to choose either us or the Titans. And so I think we should go after him. I don't see why we shouldn't, especially if we really need to just upgrade that edge position and we're not going to re-sign Houston. So I'm a big proponent of we should go after him.
Yeah, but you also look at the pass rush market. I'd rather go after one of those younger guys. Personally, I know they're going to cost a little bit more, and it goes back to Orlando Brown. Like, if you trade for Orlando Brown, then you can't go get one of these stud guys, pass rusher, wide receiver, in free agency. So I would more be inclined to go get a Romeo Arqua. I think how you say it, Arqua. Sorry, Aquara. Thank you, Romeo Aquara from Detroit. He was a Pro Bowl type player this last year. Or even, you mentioned Shaquille Barrett, depending if he goes back to Tampa Bay. That'll be interesting to see what happens. Or Carl Lawson. Those are the three names that I'm really in on for the Indianapolis Colts. If any of those guys are not tagged or re-signed by their respective teams, Colts should be on that 100% right away, because that is the biggest need on defense, I think. We said corner, but ultimately, man, it comes back to, can you get to the pass rusher? You can have average corners. You can't have average pass rush if you want to be a dominant defense. So, I wouldn't mind it, but also I would like to explore other options before I do that. So, that's probably my thought on that. All right, let's move on to Jacob. He asked, what do you think Jacob Eason's future will be? Do you think he'll be a career backup, or maybe you think he goes somewhere and flourishes?
Man, this is a tough question now that we have Carson in here.
Yeah.
I do think that he's going to be the straight backup this year. I don't think we're going to resign Jacoby. If we do, I guess I'd be okay with it. But I think he's going to be a backup at least for the Colts for now. And just due to Carson's injury history, I think he's got to definitely be ready. And he could definitely shine. And, obviously he's not going to pull a Tom Brady, but he could pull a Tom Brady game. Obviously, if he comes in and shines, if Carson goes down. If that happens, then, I'd be totally fine with having him who learned from Phillip Rivers, who learned from Jacoby Brissett, who learned from Andrew Luck and Tom Brady. I'd be totally fine with having him in there and stepping up when he needs to do it. But if we're paying Carson all that money, I think – he could just be ending up a backup for us for a little while. Now, if he does want to go somewhere and get signed for a free agency, or we do trade him, or someone is interested in him, I can definitely see him flourishing. But I think Zach Hicks had a really good film thread a couple months ago. I believe it was Zach Hicks about showing Jacob Eason and his potential on broken plays, and it just didn't really look very. He had like a really good breakdown on how if it's not a scripted play, he didn't really look too good. And so obviously we got to wait and see what he actually does in the pros since we haven't seen a thing. But it's really up in the air to see if he flourishes or not.
Yeah, I mean, it should be right now. I mean, you haven't seen him, like you said, play a snap in the NFL, not even in a preseason game. So it's hard to say that, but I mean, strictly from a potential standpoint, he has a chance to be a good quarterback in the league. I think he has the physical tools, right? I mean, there's a reason why people were giving him potentially a first-round grade a couple of years ago, right? I mean, people were doing that. You can laugh about that, but people actually were doing that because he got the physical tools to be a franchise quarterback. He got him in the fourth round. I think he got him in the fourth round for a reason. There are issues. He's not a perfect prospect by any stretch of the imagination, but he's got the arm strength, right? He's got the potential to be a starting quarterback eventually. I kind of look at it like this with Jacob Eason, right? This is year 2 of a 4-year rookie deal for him. So you see what you got with Carson Wentz, right? If he's really, really bad this year or whatever, or you commit to him 2 years and he's really bad, maybe at that point Eason's ready to jump in and be the starter. And you see what you got with him there. That's kind of where I'm at with him right now, is kind of just don't force him into being the starter right away. Just let him continue to learn and soak it in, because he hasn't really played a whole lot of games, right? He doesn't have a whole lot of game time experience in college. He didn't have a ton, right? He only played 1 year at Washington. So I just want to get him more experience, see him in the preseason before I can really make any determinations on how I think his career is going to go. But as of right now, I think you're right. Back up for at least a year, maybe 2. And then we'll see what happens with Jacob Eason after that. But yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
We will. Yeah, it's all about waiting and seeing with him. And so that's why I thought people were crazy when they're like, let Jacob Eason start. I was like, what? We haven't even seen him play a snap. How do we know if he's any good? He could be really good, but how do we know, right? How do we know? He hasn't accomplished anything. He hasn't even played a game yet. So, that's kind of how my feelings on Jacob Eason. Sorry if there's any Jacob Eason lovers in here. Apologies. All right, let's move on now to Miles Bryan. He asked, if Wentz doesn't pan out this year, is Frank's job on the line?
No. I'm just kidding. We're going to leave it at that. No, this is Frank's 4th QB. I think he's done an exemplary job with everyone that he's had. If, maybe if it's like a weird scenario where it's strictly Frank who costs us a couple different games, then maybe. But if it's Wentz that doesn't really pan out, I don't think it's Frank's fault. I feel like if there's everyone in the media is saying this, if there's anyone who could fix Carson, it's Frank. And if Frank knows exactly how to work with the QB that he has. He knows how to use the QB strengths to his advantages. He already worked with Carson. We all know the stats. We don't have to go over that again. So I really do think if it doesn't pan out, it's going to be on Carson. So no, I don't think Frank's job is going to be on the line. No.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the quarter, it's not like Frank Reich, his quarterbacks haven't played well, right? I mean, you saw what, like I mentioned, you saw what he did with Luck, you saw what he did with Phillip Rivers. Like this is a good opportunity, right? And like you said, I feel like the Colts didn't if this was like a Matthew Stafford type of trade, then I might be more inclined to say yes, because that's a win now move to me. But this Carson Wentz trade is more of a, hey, we like the potential. We like the physical tools. Let's see if we can tap back into what he was before that ACL injury, and even what he was in 2018, 2019, right? So for me, I'm kind of right there with you. I'm like, it's ultimately comes down to Carson, right? And if he doesn't do well, maybe it's more on him than Frank Reich, right? So I definitely agree with you there. I think would be more on Carson Wentz than Frank Reich. But, I mean, it's important to consider, right? Like, this is now the second quarterback that Frank Reich has brought in. Phillip Rivers, obviously, the first one that we would say. And, you haven't won a playoff game with Phillip Rivers. If Carson Wentz is terrible and you don't even get to the playoffs, maybe the seat's a little bit warmer. I don't know. I wouldn't say he's in danger of losing his job, but maybe it's a little bit warmer. Like, okay, now this is your second quarterback that we really haven't done a whole lot with.
And you're the one that
right, and you're the one that pushed for this guy. Okay. So that's a lot of what ifs, obviously. But if it comes to that point, maybe that's a conversation we have about, is his seat getting a little bit warm? But, we don't know. He could turn out to be a really solid quarterback. So, that's all what ifs right now, in my opinion. So, yeah. All right, Easy Glade. He says, if you could add any player in the league right now to the Colts, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. The first one that comes to mind is J.J. Watt or Shaquille Barrett, a really good pass rusher right away. But I'm only thinking of free agents, so I'm going to think outside the box and just grab anyone, like even if they're not a free agent or if we can just randomly trade for them. I'm not going to do QBs because I'm not just going to be like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, because, I think who I would really like to fit not only our culture, but our locker room and to fit the personality that I really want to. This is going to sound really weird and it's going to be bad, but I would really love Jarvis Landry. I don't know if you saw the Hard Knocks of him when he first got to the Browns, when he was yelling at the receivers about how they're going to change the culture, how he's going to lead the way. He's been there for 3 years. He's been playing hurt for the past 2 years. There were a lot of reports that came out saying that he had a lot of hip problems. He had a lot of different injuries that he was playing through during the playoffs, during everything. And when OBJ went down, Jarvis just absolutely stepped up. I love the fight that Jarvis has. I've always been a huge Jarvis Fandry. Jarvis Fandry. Hey, that's funny. Yeah, I've always been a huge Jarvis Landry fan. And so I don't know why. I would just absolutely love him in our locker room.
Sure.
And so that's the first one that comes to my mind.
Gotcha. I mean, I got to go pass rusher. I got to go TJ Watt or Khalil Mack. One of those guys, man. I mean, that's obviously not going to happen. But if I'm choosing anybody, I mean, that's a big position of need. You can get an elite pass rusher. Maniac Goats 53. Who do you think Wentz's favorite target will be, Pittman or Campbell?
Now, there was another tweet that came out recently. I think either BTJ did post it or someone else did, saying that when Wentz was having his MVP year with Frank Reich, Alshon Jeffrey had 103 receptions or something like that year. And I mean, I can only imagine that Pittman's going to have that something similar like that. I think he's going to definitely throw it up to Pittman whenever he can. I mean, the way that he torched this Bills secondary in the playoffs just makes me so proud and so happy of him. So I think he's just definitely going to be the favorite.
I think so too. Yeah, I definitely think so. But yeah, Paris Campbell, like we said, don't underestimate him. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a weapon. But I agree. I think Pittman's an ascending player. He showed a lot in that Buffalo game. He showed a lot in that Green Bay game. So he's going to only get better too. He's going to get better in the red zone. He wasn't really that effective. They didn't really target him in the red zone. So I have to imagine with that size, they're going to use him more. He's going to get more accustomed to using his body in that red zone in the NFL. So yeah, I think Pittman's the obvious choice there.
All right, cool. Now we're going to move on to Abandon Explained. He's actually got two questions for you.
Okay.
First one is, what number do you think Carson Wentz will wear? Because I think Pittman already did say on a stream that he's going to keep 11.
Yeah.
And secondly, do you think that Wentz will be – do you think – this is his words. Do you think Wentz will be just as saucy as Phil Rivers?
Well, define saucy for me. I'm not exactly sure what that means.
I think saucy is just playing good. I assume you mean –
Gotcha. Well, the first question, also thank you for sending that in. It's a pretty funny one. But the first question, I have kind of two numbers in mind that I think would potentially be kind of good for him. I think I like the number 10. I don't know. That just looks clean to me. Okay. For him, I've seen kind of some Photoshops. I mean, I'm not even going to say number 12 because Colts fans will lose their absolute mind. I wouldn't mind number 4 also. I don't know. Number 4 or number 2. I guess I have 3 because number 2, second chances, all that stuff. So was taken number 2 overall in the 2016 draft. I could see that happening potentially. And what if it's a little bit of a slant at the Eagles for choosing Jalen Hurts over him?
Right. That's true.
I don't know. So those are kind of mine. Second question. You know what? I'll say this. I feel like we always trash on Phillip Rivers for his immobility and stuff like that. I mean, Phillip Rivers is darn good at the line of scrimmage. Like, he is really elite at the line of scrimmage. So I think from that standpoint, Carson Wentz has some room to make up on that. But from a physical standpoint, like we said, Carson Wentz can do so much more. I think, honestly, it opens up so much for what your offense wants to do. I feel like you were limited with what Phillip Rivers could do for your offense just because of this lack of mobility. But I think it helps a lot with the RPO game, right? It helps a lot. Jonathan Taylor, I think even the offensive line, it can help out a little bit as well. You're not having to protect just a quarterback that's so immobile. Now, you may see some more sack numbers just because Carson Wentz is kind of like Andrew Luck in that way, where he struggles sometimes to just get rid of the ball. He always wants to make a play. We saw, Frank Reich kind of coach a little bit of that out of Andrew Luck his 1 year with him. But I think overall, I think he's definitely more. The upside is so much more tremendous than we had Phillip Rivers in 2020. Not a shot at Phil. He's just almost 40. That's just reality of it. But that's kind of my thoughts there on that. Thank you for those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. So I agree with you. I think number 4 would be perfect because he grew up idolizing Brett Favre. And I think it'd be just a nice fresh start, especially if Deshaun Watson leaves. We'd have the perfect number 4 then. So we can just get the whole AFC South talk.
That's right.
And, no, I agree with you, man. Like, he's got such a high ceiling. He's got a higher ceiling than Phil, but he does have a lower floor, I think, because of decision making, because he does hold on to the ball a little bit. So I think he does have the potential to be just as saucy abandoned. Now we'll move on to a person named Sassy. A lot of Paris Campbell questions. Will Paris Campbell get hurt again, and do you think he is a bust?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict injuries, but no, I don't think he's a bust. I just think he's had some unfortunate luck with, 2019. That was probably more on Paris Campbell just because the physical standpoint, he wasn't where he should have been. He even has admitted that. But the second part of that question, you think he's a bust? This last year was just unfortunate, right? I think he's shown the potential of where you drafted him. It's just, if he can stay healthy, you know what? Then he'll prove people wrong. But right now, it's hard to say that he's a bust because we just haven't seen him. He's been a good player when he's been healthy. He just hasn't been healthy. I can't just throw around the bust label quite yet.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. It's just unfortunate injuries at this point. Now, Sebastian Jakubik, I believe that's how you pronounce it, says, do you guys see the Colts winning a Super Bowl in the next 5 years? Got to hear it from one Colts fan to another.
Man, you're making me do Super Bowl predictions the next 5 years. Oh, man, that's hard to say, man. I mean, they're certainly a very talented team. I'll say that. I hate making these bold predictions. I just hate it because I know inevitably I'm going to get on that Freezing Cold Takes Twitter when I do that. But I certainly think it'll depend on the quarterback. I mean, it's got to, right? Like, if Carson Wentz can get back to a little bit of his form, I think they have a really good shot, honestly. But saying that, also, you look at the AFC, you got Mahomes, you got Allen, you got Jackson, you got even Tannehill. Like, you've got some pretty solid quarterbacks coming up. Potentially Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. Like, there are so many potential quarterbacks that would be phenomenal, right? And there's more that I didn't even mention of young quarterbacks. There's so much young talent in that AFC. The Colts got to figure out their quarterback situation. They're certainly talented enough to go toe-to-toe with some of those teams. But can the quarterback ultimately put them over the edge? That's going to be the biggest question. If he can, certainly.
Yep. I heard someone, I think it was Colin Coward, who said even if Carson Wentz is just like a top 15 quarterback with the team that we have around him, I think we can definitely get one within the next couple of years. So, I mean, you're right. It really just depends on, what was the main problem this year? Execution. As long as we can execute and we do our jobs, I think we're going to be totally fine. All right. Now we're going to move on to Twitter. That was all the YouTube. We're moving on to Jeff Node. What he says is, how much will Jacob Eason be able to help Wentz learn the system and get acclimated to being accumulated? Let me redo that.
No worries.
All right, cool. Jeff Node on Twitter goes, how much will Jacob Eason be able to help Wentz learn the system and get acclimated to being a Colt? Or will Ballard try to bring back Jacoby for that reason as his backup?
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for the question. We kind of mentioned this already. We feel like Eason will be the backup, so Jacoby probably won't be back, in our opinion. But answering the question here, You know what? The thing is, I think Wentz already kind of knows a good chunk of the playbook because, right, like he was with Frank Reich for a couple of years there. He's been with him for 2 years. So it's a very similar playbook in a lot of ways. But yeah, Eason could help him in certain ways because he's been in the system 1 year more than Carson Wentz has. So I think potentially they can both help each other. I think that's just what you do when you're in a room. You help each other learn. You help each other do that stuff. But I think Jacob Eason will be the primary backup, and Jacoby Brissett will be looking elsewhere this offseason, this next year.
Mm-hmm. And let's also not forget, man, Marcus Brady, who was the QB's coach last year. Obviously, he was the QB's coach helping out Phillip Rivers, learning from all these guys and learning so much different stuff. He's now the offensive coordinator. I feel like he's going to be a huge help as well. A lot of people aren't really talking enough about him. I think he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. So I really hope that he's able to also get Carson ready for it as well. From Always Foul, who is at Brent's sides, with the addition of Wentz, surely we can get a good receiver in free agency, right? When I say good, I don't mean Aguilar, Snead, or Watkins. I'm talking Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Godwin, the game changers. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was a question I had. Does this Carson Wentz trade all of a sudden, I know he wasn't great, but now you know who your quarterback's going to be. Does that help some receivers now if they want to come to Indianapolis? Like, okay, I'm going to be catching passes from Carson Wentz now. He was an MVP a few years ago. So I think that maybe will help a little bit. Some people will say, well, why would that help? I mean, you already have such a good team around you, right? And I know everybody, the ultimate goal is a Super Bowl, so maybe it will help teams, help players rather, kind of realize, okay, wow, these guys are ready to compete now. They just made a power move to get a quarterback. They feel like they're ready to compete. Their Super Bowl window is just open. I'm going to jump on that. I can see that happening, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, I can too. I think the timing is perfect because we have a couple weeks still to kind of figure out free agency, who we would really want to go for. I mean, I'm sure guys are already talking. Some players are talking here and there. Whenever the tampering happens, it happens all around the league in every single league. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think we definitely can. I would love to see Chris Godwin. I think out of those guys too. I am a big fan of Allen Robinson, but I feel like Chris Godwin would be a little bit cheaper. I don't know because he's a Super Bowl winner now, so maybe not.
Right. Yeah. It's just kind of a question of who's Tampa Bay going to keep. It's either Shaquille Barrett, I feel like, or Chris Godwin. Who are they going to keep? Right. We'll see, I guess. But, if either of those guys come available, I think it would be wise for the Colts to look into that.
Ian Kennedy, just a lot of Wentz questions today. Adding Wentz, do you think the Eagles would be open for a trade for Zach Ertz? And if not, which free agent tight end or obviously receiver, which we just talked about, has the best fit to play in the Wentz-Reich-led offense?
Ian, thanks for the question, man. Appreciate it. You know what? I feel like Zach Ertz is going to be released. I honestly feel like it. I mean, the Eagles we know the Eagles are backed into a corner with him. I mean, they're already eating so much cap from Carson Wentz being traded, right? So much dead cap they're eating. So they got to just get rid of him somehow. And I think teams aren't stupid and they know that. Why give a draft pick away when you could potentially just sign this guy in free agency? But if he does become available, I can definitely see that being a viable thing. A couple other names that interest me. Hunter Henry's a name that's kind of been floating around. Jonnu Smith, who nobody really talks about for some reason. I would like him potentially. Maybe he's slightly cheaper than a Hunter Henry. But I would like any of those tight ends, quite honestly. I think, Zach Ertz obviously didn't have a great year last year. He's a little bit older than both of those guys. But any of these tight ends, I think, would be great. And I think maybe Ertz has a little bit of an advantage working with Carson Wentz and Frank Reich, that relationship. Maybe similar to the Trey Burton last year. I could maybe see that happening. So, I get you there.
Yeah, no, I agree. We do just have to wait and see if he gets cut or whatnot. But if he doesn't, I don't want to trade for him. I definitely lean towards Hunter Henry. Now we got the B-Ball Pro 1800 with the potential of Von Miller, J.J. Watt, Shaq Barrett, Bud Dupree, and Carl Lawson on the free agent market. I feel like we should go big on pass rush and let Ballard draft O-line and receivers through the draft. Do you agree with that?
Okay. Thanks for the question again. So I think definitely pass rusher should be addressed in free agency. I think there's a lot of names. You just mentioned a few that the Colts could potentially go get. I think they have to go get one of those guys because, I mean, as good as Ballard's been, let's face it, he really hasn't been terrific at drafting at the edge so far, right? Yeah. I mean, we can still see what some of these guys are, but none of these guys have turned into superstars. None of these guys have been Darius Leonard or even like Akari Willis. None of these guys have been really good players at this point. They've been inconsistent at best. They've shown flashes, but nothing, concrete for 16 games. So saying that, I think those guys still have potential for sure. But I think with all the crop of viable pass rushers on the market, you got to sign one or even two of these guys potentially and just get your pass rush where it needs to be. You already took care of the interior this last offseason. You go address the pass rush on the edge, and your defensive line, man, is so much better already, right? We saw how big of an addition DeForest Buckner was to that interior. Imagine getting a guy like Carl Lawson or Romeo Aquara. I can never say his name right. But imagine getting one of those guys, a Pro Bowl type of player, to pair alongside of him and Grover Stewart. And if you do re-sign Justin Houston or a Kamoko Toure comes on, or you have to even Danico Autry, that's a pretty darn good defensive line, in my opinion. So I think defensive end, certainly. I think potentially wide receivers should be as well. It's just as deep in terms of wide receivers. Now, I think maybe you can get, because there's so many wide receivers, maybe you don't have to go get a Godwin or an Allen Robinson and drop 20 plus million on those guys. Maybe you can get a guy like Corey Davis or a guy like Curtis Samuel, maybe one of those, two-tier type of guys that you could get that are still young and still have a lot of potential, but they're not as refined and they're not going to cost as much. So maybe you do that. I personally, I would go left tackle and corner in the first 2 rounds if you're asking me today, because I think those are 2 big positions of need that are very deep in this draft. So kind of choose between the best prospect wherever you are, whether that's 21, whether you trade back, whatever it is. I think certainly those are the 2 positions I'm looking for right now to address in the draft. It's left tackle and corner, and then you address the rest in free agency.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Now we got to go to Bill Koloski. It's either Kozlowski or Koloski. I hope I'm saying it right, Bill. What do you think of Pat Freemuth? I believe that's how you pronounce it as well. He's a tight end from Penn State. Right now, I'm thinking he gets drafted somewhere in the 2nd round. He watched a lot of him in college, and he's exactly what the Colts need at the tight end position. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So those of you who have watched this know I'm not like a huge, I'm not like a giant draft nerd. You know what I mean? I'm just not. I just don't naturally gravitate towards that. And there's a lot of people who are, which is why I bring on a lot of people who know a lot more about these prospects and they study them day in and day out as opposed to what I do. So, but saying that, based off of what you're saying here, Bill, that could be a surprise 2nd round pick, honestly. But, I think about it like this. What if the Colts traded back from 21? They got a 3rd round pick or something along those lines. Would he still be available potentially in that 3rd round, getting a tight end? I could see that potentially happening, honestly. But if he's as good of a prospect as you say, I would not be shocked if he's the best player available when the Colts pick in the 2nd round, if Ballard just went and shocked everybody and took him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. Now Ballard feels very comfortable about taking the guy that he wants. We obviously know he traded up for Jonathan Taylor. We saw what he did, saw what Pittman did. So at this point, man, if Ballard wants to trade back, Ballard wants to trade all of his picks for something, I'm going to let him do whatever he wants. He's
earned it.
Yeah, but definitely. Now we got Carside. He's asking, with the possibility of Von Miller being cut by Denver, would you see the Colts taking a chance on him as well, instead of like a Shaq Barrett or Carl Lawson?
Sure. Well, I think it really depends on that legal situation with Von Miller, right? If that all gets sorted out and he's good, then I could see that happening. I could really see the Colts going after a guy trying to tap into a Von Miller. He's not going to cost as much as some of those other guys because he's a little bit older, but he's still a pretty solid player and a pretty good player in his own right. He's had how many sacks in his career? He's been really, really phenomenal. So I could see them potentially doing that. Maybe like the Justin Houston move. Maybe it's kind of that replacement. Maybe so. But ultimately, it depends on that whole legal situation if that gets figured out.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we just got to wait and see with that legal situation because I didn't really do any sort of digging into it, so I'm just going to let them figure it out. That Trevor McNutt, I love that name, by the way, man. The 1st round pick, we've already kind of been talking about the draft now a little bit even more. He is asking, do we, A, draft a left tackle, B, draft an edge rusher, C, any other position, or D, trade back? I'm of the mindset that we're probably going to trade back. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, so I actually feel like I can put these in order. So I'd say number 1 would be D. Number 2 would be Well, number 2 would really be A or B, depending who's the better prospect.
Yeah.
I could see them doing either way. I personally would probably say left tackle because there's obviously a bigger need at left tackle right now than edge rusher, you would say, because you have some guys potentially you can plug in at edge rusher that maybe aren't the best in the world, but they're still solid players there, right? So I'd probably say left tackle, then edge rusher, and then you can draft another position, whether that's tight end, whether that's more interior offensive line help. I could see Chris Ballard even going after a linebacker, a more coverage linebacker in those like mid to later rounds. I could see him doing that with the uncertainty with Anthony Walker if he's going to get re-signed or not. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think there's so many options they can do, but I think, to answer the question about the first round, I think they certainly trade back and draft a left tackle. That's probably my thought.
Yeah, same here. That's what I hope they do, honestly. I would love more picks for Ballard. He finds the best gems, so I'm cool with it.
Right.
Now, Brent Evitz asked today if Carson Wentz, like the North Dakota State Carson Wentz, was coming into this draft class with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, all those guys. If he was coming out this year, what pick or where do you think he would be selected?
That's a really good then there's a lot of pretty decent quarterbacks, I would say, this year. And then those first couple quarterbacks, at least, I would probably say top 10, honestly. I don't know. Would you even say top 5? I mean, there's outside of the first couple guys, there's not really like a team that's like, oh my goodness, unless a team trades up, of course. There's not really a team that's like, oh my goodness, we need a quarterback this year. So I'd probably say like top 10, maybe like Carolina or, one of those type of teams that needs a quarterback. That, Carolina's kind of been rumored into being in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. If that didn't pan out, maybe they go and get a guy like that. So I would definitely think he'd be top 10 because he is a very talented quarterback. Physically, like we said, he's got everything you look for in a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. Probably top 10, top 15. It just really does depend on. I would have to go back and look at like his North Dakota State tape compared to other guys right now. So that's a tough question, but it's a good question. I think top 15, something like that. Moving to believe in the culture. It is Matthew Vire, 1993. Who will Wentz's first TD pass be to?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Oh, okay. So we're making some predictions time. I said I didn't like to make predictions, but I'm doing it anyway. Oh my goodness. You got one already?
Oh yeah.
Go for it. I'm still thinking.
Naeem Hunt.
Okay. No. I had that thought cross my mind.
It's going to be Naeem Hunt.
Okay. I'm going to say Zach Pascal.
Ooh, that's a good one too. Zach's just the most consistent receiver we've had in so long. I love watching Zach play. Yeah. I am thinking to Naeem though, because I just have a feeling there's going to be like a nice little screen or a nice little out route or just even maybe a check down that Carson's just like, all right, cool, there you go, and Naeem's going to make a play. So that's right. Like it'll be unexpected, not trying to go for the touchdown whatsoever, but Naeem's going to be Naeem. That's what will probably happen. All right, now we also have at KV with the shot. He says, "Do you think we're going to re-sign TY?"
Ooh, wow, this is a really good question. I've seen such conflicting things, right? Like I feel like, oh yeah, we're going to re-sign him, and then TY's like, well, maybe we'll see what happens, and all this stuff. It's not like he's been causing drama. It's just like we just don't know right now. At the end of the day, I do think the Colts re-sign TY Hilton. I think he's just such a valuable player, such a valuable veteran. I mean, he started out a little bit slow. Maybe you can credit that to lack of just the offense gelling and stuff like that. But he started to come on at the end of the year, and ultimately he led the Colts in receiving. So I could see the Colts potentially bringing him back as well. But I do think even if you do bring him back, like I said earlier, that shouldn't hinder your approach to potentially adding another wide receiver in free agency. I think you kind of need to.
No, yeah, I agree. I'm mainly hoping, just because I'm such a huge fan of him, that I really hope we can sign him. I hope he really just wants to come back for another year. I hope Jim Irsay even has some influence on it. So I know Irsay really wants him back. He's on Lucas Oil for a reason. He's the only one out there. So we're going to try our best to try to get him back for at least for one more year. York Wyatt says, what position do you guys think is a bigger priority? We've kind of been over this, but out of these two specifically, left tackle or a pass rusher right now, what do you think is most priority?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen the Super Bowl showed us the value of both of them, right? Like a value of a good pass rush with Tampa Bay. And then with on the flip side with Kansas City, the lack of having a quality. I mean, they had some injuries, but you know what I mean? Like the lack of offensive line, no matter how good your quarterback is, if you're not protecting him, he can't do much. So saying that, I'll go back to the argument I said earlier. You have some potential guys you can bring back in free agency. Justin Houston, Ngakoue, Autry, to name a few. Al-Qadi Muhammad's another name. You can bring some of those guys back. They're not the best pass rushers in the world, but they're still solid guys. I mean, they both had, between Houston and Autry, they both had, I believe, 9+ sacks. So they still were pretty decent for you in 2020. So I think for me, you have potentially some options. And they may not be your most favorite options, but you have some there. You have some young pass rushers. You've invested a couple second-round picks into some pass rushers. Mm-hmm. But for me, left tackle, you have nobody, right? You really have Will Holden, and that's about it right now. So for me, left tackle needs to be a priority, honestly, in my opinion, because you just don't have it right now. You have nobody there that you feel comfortable, playing, plugging in there and playing week 1 to protect Carson Wentz. You just don't have that. So I would say left tackle.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it'll tie back into, if we don't trade back, it'll tie back into me. I think we do need to resort to drafting a left tackle because, you see how you're right. You're hitting the nail on the head. We do have some pass rushers who we've already drafted and we tried to, invest in. And the guys that we normally draft right now are becoming some of them are becoming superstars, but all the other guys are becoming just really good, solid football players. And we just need that one solid football player. We need that guy who's going to be our guy. I don't really want to, I don't want to have to reach out to Trent Williams if we have to for a 1-year flyer. I think priority right now, we got to get our guy at left tackle. You're right. Yeah,
and I would love to have all our offensive line under contract for the next 4 to 5 years. I mean, that would you don't have to address it. You don't have to touch it for the next couple of years. If you draft a left tackle in that first round or later in the first round, even second round, that would help so much. And you don't have to touch it for a while because you've already found all your other pieces on your offensive line. Mm-hmm. So that's got my thought on it, at least.
Yep, I agree. Coming from our buddy Kent, who's at Kent0939, bunch of 3s and 9s. Who will Carson Wentz's backup be?
We said Jacob Eason, right?
Yeah, we pretty much answered that. It's Jacob Eason, for sure. Yeah. I think, if Jacoby Brissett does want to come back, I don't think there's any way we're going to sign him for what we signed him for first couple of years. It'll be significantly less money. So if he thinks he can get a starting job, or I'm not saying things, I think he definitely can. I'm saying if he thinks he can get a lot more money with a starting job and go to a different team, like let's say even someone like the Bears, like let's say the Bears trade Trubisky or cut Trubisky, someone like that, or the Jets if they trade Darnold. I feel like they can definitely. They're going to draft a guy number 2. You know what I mean?
I get you though. Yeah. Some of those teams that need a potential bridge quarterback, I get that.
Right. Exactly. So I think it's definitely going to be Eason.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think, you can say all you want. We don't know what we have in him, but you drafted him a pretty decent pick last year. It wasn't like a, early pick, but it was still decent. I mean, why wouldn't you have him be your backup and just learn behind Carson Wentz? I mean, he's got potential. He's not a Scott Tolzien type of guy, right? Like he's got the potential to be potentially a starter, like we mentioned already earlier in this Q&A. So I think he's going to be your primary backup. I just don't really see why Jacoby would want to come back, if I'm being honest. I mean, obviously you have those relationships with the guys, but like it gives me similar to like Joe Haeg vibes last year, like we already mentioned. You want to go to a team where you feel like you can actually compete for a starting job, and it's not going to be here in Indianapolis. So maybe he thinks one of those teams he can go get and compete for a starting job. I wouldn't blame him at all.
Not at all. And he deserves the money. He's a great guy. He deserves to do whatever he wants at this point. But of course, I'm selfish and I would love him back because of how good of a locker room player he is as well.
Sure.
So we'll see. And people always do forget. You're right. It was a good pick. Like Marlon Mack was our 4th round pick a couple of years ago. Corey Willis was either a 3rd or 4th round pick.
He was a 4th rounder as well. Yeah. Yep.
Like all these guys are so helpful and such great players as well. Like if Jacob Eason comes in and plays as the equivalent of what Corey Willis has been playing like, that's a solid QB. That's like a top 15 QB, I would think, because Corey Willis has quietly been so consistent. He only missed 1 broken tackle. I think it was on Derrick Henry. So, I mean, makes sense. And so I feel like he's definitely got a lot of potential. You're right. 4th round pick, people are always like, oh, no, he wasn't picked in the top 10 or blah, 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 blah. Tom Brady was 199. Let's always just remember that. So
Yeah, and Dak was a 4th round pick too. I mean, we're not going to go there, but there is potential. You never know with these guys. I mean, it's not like, he has no, like I said earlier, like people were hyping him up last year. I mean, people thought the Colts were going to take him in round 2. They honestly did. People did. So he has potential, man. And right now, I think the best spot for him is just to sit behind Wentz and learn. And how's he going to do that? He's going to be the backup. He's going to play preseason. He's going to do all that stuff he needs to do potentially to be a starting quarterback down the line. But the next question here from David at David Zoned. He says, I know you've been super adamant about trading back, and I agree. However, make a list of players who would semi-realistically fall to you at 21. So assuming, you don't trade up for anybody. So players at 21, who are some guys that stand out to me? He says mine would be Waddle, Slater, Rousseau, or Darisaw. Who are some guys potentially, Michael, that you're seeing?
At 21, I understand out of those players specifically that he just said, I can't get over Jalen Waddle. I would always love to see another weapon, especially with Carson Wentz. But, man, I mean, any of those guys, if they fall to us right then and there, I'd be happy with it. But obviously, we are still looking at the left tackle. I am personally, of course, of the mindset that we want to trade back. But then, of course, if one of those guys is there, probably got to get the tackle as well.
Yeah, I get you there. I mean, really, if any of those offensive tackles, if any of those guys fall, I mean, I would definitely go for that. I know there's some corners as well. I know Pitts probably won't be there at 21, but that's an interesting name if he did fall. A lot of people have said, well, that would be a really good fit. I mean, but assuming he's even there, which is very unlikely probably. So the question, David, appreciate it. All right, next one from Matthew Sanchez. He says, so someone has to be pessimistic. So we have one person here. For the sake of asking the question, he says, let's say Wentz doesn't return to form and has a lot of the similar issues as last season. And he puts in quotes, still love the trade for the price. How long is this leash on Wentz this season? So talking about this season specifically, if he's really bad, how long is the leash?
That's a good question. I feel like Frank Reich out of most coaches would be a little bit more lenient as to maybe not the best of play. We saw what he was like with Adam Vinatieri. We saw what him and Chris Ballard were like with, Rocky Sin having his troubles this past year on defense. I think he would probably be, if he just wasn't able to be himself, wasn't able to actually really get the ball moving, and he wasn't able to get rid of those turnovers. I think maybe week 10, somewhere along those lines, maybe not halfway through the season, but 3/4 through the season or something like that, maybe week 12, he'd be like, yeah, I think we probably need to go ahead and pull it and play Eason.
Yeah, I think so too. It really depends how bad is bad. It would be interesting, though, if Carson Wentz went back-to-back years being benched. I mean, my goodness. I mean, the good news, I guess, out of all that would be you're most likely not giving up first-round pick next year. So that's good, at least. Maybe you could have a little bit of ammunition if you like a quarterback or something like that. So thanks for that question. Next one from Mario Borelli. He says, there's a lot of talk about J.J. Watt coming to Indy. He says, I personally don't like it. I think this is the year to get a young defensive end that can be a game wrecker and free up the double team on Buckner. He says, I really like Lawson or Quarta as they're both young with high motors. Thoughts? I mean, this is something we talked about earlier with the J.J. Watt argument. But I guess give your thoughts again real fast on J.J. Watt and against some of these younger pass rushers.
Of course. I mean, I was quoted as saying earlier that I would pay any amount of money for J.J. Watt because I'm such a huge fan of him. However, as Cody and I have been talking, I am sort of into the idea of getting a younger free agent or younger pass rusher as well, no matter what, because we don't know what J.J. Watt wants in the long run. But someone like a Shaq Lawson or a Shaq Barrett and a Romeo Okwara, shout out to Charlotte, North Carolina. He went to Audrey Kell actually here in Charlotte. Shout out to that. I would absolutely love that as well. So just, you're right. As long as we free up the double team on DeForest Buckner, I'm cool with whoever we get. I do think, however, Chris Ballard is going to lean towards Shaquille Barrett because of his Super Bowl, because of how he played there, how he played in the long run and in the big games. You want the guys who are calm, cool, and collected who can actually really perform in those games. So I think Shaquille Barrett is definitely on his radar.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think both those guys, I really think whoever hits the market, that is a big question, though. Who out of these guys would hit the open market? Who would this, which team would not be able to afford a player, would be foolish and let a player walk like that? But yeah, I personally think Ballard would be in on any of those guys because that is the biggest need on defense, like we've said multiple times already before. Next one from @4 T.H. James. He says, we know Pagano wanted John Smith. If you remember that name, that's a throwback right there.
Barely.
We know he wanted, I mean, we didn't really see him, but he said, we know he wanted him because he could make him great, right? He thought he could make him great. It didn't happen. He said, what if Frank, who wanted Carson, doesn't fix him? Then the Colts are back to square one, searching for a quarterback again.
Yeah, that's right. If he doesn't fix him, then yes, of course, we're back to square one. But as Frank Reich has done throughout his tenure here, he's had a new quarterback every single season, and he's performed fairly well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the one that wasn't the best was the 2019 season when Ngakoue got hurt, and different things happened. That was also when Andrew Luck clearly retired 2 weeks before the season. So we can make excuses. We can also say there shouldn't be excuses. However, what I've seen, and I think what a lot of unbiased people have seen, is that Frank Reich's a great coach. So if Carson Wentz doesn't work out, yeah, that sucks. And yeah, we gave up a couple picks, not too many picks, we didn't overpay, I don't think. I think that's pretty much the consensus as well. And I think the Eagles need to get some credit here. If Carson Wentz plays to the ability that he can, and we do make the playoffs and he does play that 70 or 75%, the Eagles get a first rounder, and that's what they were looking for. And I know it's not going to be the first rounder that they got for Carson Wentz, but in this day and age, I know it wasn't what they wanted, wasn't a Matthew Stafford trade, but they got something out of a guy that didn't want to be there instead of having to cut him like the Texans did with J.J. Watt. Mm-hmm. So I think the Eagles deserve some credit. However, I still think we won the trade, so thank you.
I mean, yeah, definitely will be interesting to see what happens. But, I kind of look at it like this. You weren't going to trade, probably not. It would cost a lot, I should say, if you're going to try to trade up and get a quarterback. And that's no slam dunk, right, that he's going to be the guy either. And really, for the draft capital you gave up, you're not going to get a player of Carson Wentz's potential, right? His physical stature and everything that comes along with that. Mm-hmm. His 2017 season where we saw what his ceiling could be. You're not going to get a player like that at 21. You're just not, right? You're probably not going to get a guy in free agency like that. You got to make a trade for that guy. So, I get it. I get there's some risk. I would say this is definitely the riskiest move of the Ballard tenure and Ballard Reich tenure here. But still, yeah, it definitely is. But still, I kind of look at it as well, what else were you supposed to do, right? At quarterback, to get the guy of Carson Wentz's talent, right? And so I look at it as yeah, it's a risk, but I feel like it was kind of a necessary risk that you had to take to find potentially your franchise quarterback that's still under the age of 30 for a couple more years, still has a lot of prime left if he can get back to that form. So I get the question for sure, but I don't fault Frank and I don't fault Chris for taking this risk because it's who else were you going to get that was going to, allow you to still address those positions in the draft and also potentially get your franchise quarterback. And I do say potentially because there's a lot of question marks, which we've already talked about. But yeah, for sure. All right, next one from Jim. He says, how big of an issue is Wentz's back? This one was a little bit confusing to me. I don't know if you looked into it. Did Carson Wentz have some back trouble early on with Philadelphia? Or maybe was that the issue in 2018 when he missed 5 games?
I think it was actually it was either 2018 or it was 2017, which took him out completely. In 2017, it might have been also a knee injury as well.
I think it was an ACL for him, right, in 2017. Mm-hmm. So it must have been 2018 then.
Right. Because I know in 2019, it was his head. He had a concussion because of the Jadeveon Clowney hit. Yeah. That was rough. And I genuinely don't think that was Carson's fault. I don't think it was Jadeveon's either. I think it was just bad timing. But I am worried about his injury past. I am worried that, he's not going to stay healthy. And, that's another reason why I don't think we gave them a legitimate first round pick and why he has to play a specific amount of snaps because he's been injury prone. And we know that. But the way that our offensive line works, the way that our team has been able to get the ball out super quick on these drag routes and everything like that. Now, obviously, Carson hasn't been too accurate on the drag routes recently, but I feel like Frank Reich is going to be able to coach him up no matter what. Marcus Brady is going to be able to coach him up no matter what. I'm going to keep saying that name, by the way. A lot of people are never going to know that name or didn't know that name much until this season. Marcus Brady is going to be a huge thing. Anyways. Yeah. I think Carson's going to be totally fine, especially if he gets the ball out really quickly, especially if he does not hold the ball onto as much as he usually does. In 2017, obviously he was with Frank. and he was playing better, but he was still holding onto the ball a lot. I feel like now that he has Frank back, he has the right people around him, the right running backs, the right receivers, the right tight ends, hopefully, and Hunter Henry or Zach Ertz. I think he'll be just fine. So as long as he just gets rid of the ball quickly, I think we don't have to worry about his injury history.
Yeah. See, I would actually push back on that injury history kind of narrative that's being pushed, because you look at I just look at the last 2 seasons, right? He played 16 games in 2019, and then this last year, he only played in 12 games. It wasn't an injury-related thing. It was just, being benched for Jalen Hurts and all that drama that comes with that. And the dude had got sacked 50 times in 12 games. So He's been taking a lot of hits, and those hits add up after a while. I mean, you could be built like Carson Wentz and Andrew Luck, and it's still, you can't just not, those hits matter, right? It can't not affect you. So I definitely understand that. Hopefully he continues to do what he's done in terms of an injury history the last 2 years, where he stayed relatively healthy and played all the games that he's been active. So that's, I guess, a little bit of encouraging news, but you're right. There was 2017 and 2018 where he dealt with some injuries back-to-back years. That is a little bit concerning, but the good thing is the last 2 years, it feels like the Eagles have gotten worse, but Carson Wentz's health has actually gotten better, which is interesting.
Right.
So I'm really interested to see what happens, like you said, with this offensive line, with kind of the RPO game that Frank likes to use, the quick passes, get out to Hines, Campbell, all those guys. I'm interested to see how that maybe helps his longevity and his durability this year. So I definitely agree with you there. I love to see what Frank Reich's going to do with him. And we saw a little bit in 2018 with Andrew Luck, right? Like, I felt like Andrew did a lot better job of protecting himself than he ever did before. And that, I give credit to Frank Reich because of that. Like, he's teaching him tendencies to, trying to coach those things out of him that he was really famous for, taking those big hits, not being afraid of it. So I'm encouraged by that. And I'm hoping, man, that Frank Reich can kind of teach him, hey, you don't always have to make the big play. You know what? You have to protect yourself. You are the most important piece on this offense because you're the quarterback. You have to protect yourself and sometimes just move on to the next play, not try to make the incredible Superman hero ball type of play. So, yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next one. It's from Daryl Ingram. He says, who's more likely, Yannick Ngakoue or Chris Godwin?
Ooh, that's a great question. Now, if you were to ask me who's more likely in free agency, pass rusher or wide receiver, I'd probably go pass rusher. But if you're telling me Yannick Ngakoue instead of Chris Godwin, I think it'd be Chris Godwin. I think Yannick Ngakoue is a great player. I just don't think he wants to be a Colt. I don't think we would also have the money to pay him what he would want. And if we want to pay, genuinely, if Yannick Ngakoue and Chris Godwin both wanted, let's say, $20 million, just an arbitrary number, they both wanted the same number, right? I think I'd rather pay Chris Godwin. And so he showed out in the Super Bowl. He's a great route runner. He's physical. He can block well. He does everything that, our culture wants and our locker room needs. Man, I think it'd be Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be team number 4 for Yannick Ngakoue in the span of a couple of years. So that might tell you something right there about he maybe not be great for the locker room. Now, Ballard has said we feel like we can handle a guy that's, maybe a little bit of a checkered past and stuff like that. Not that Yannick Ngakoue is, but he's kind of a, there's been some drama there and there's been some stuff like that. So, depending on what Ballard thinks there, but maybe, from a player standpoint, he's really good pass rusher for sure. Right. And you need that. So I wouldn't be opposed to him. It really, like you said, depends how much he's demanding. I don't honestly think it'd be a ton. Maybe I'm wrong here, but you know what? He's looking for his 4th team now. Maybe he's like, I just want to go to a contender now. Yeah. I'm kind of tired of, I don't really care about the money. I just want to win. And maybe that would be kind of an interesting thing, an interesting pairing with the Colts and, seeing what their defense did this last year, especially on that defensive line.
Right.
But yeah, I just don't even know if Chris Godwin's going to be available. I would say more likely is Yannick Ngakoue because he's obviously available, and I don't even know if Chris Godwin's going to leave Tampa Bay, honestly. But if I'm choosing, probably Godwin as well. Yeah, okay. I agree, especially if they're around the same price for sure. All right, this one from Ryan Schaefer. He says, is there any chance of the Colts picking Earl Thomas, interesting name, up from free agency?
No, everything that people have said about him and his locker room presence, everything that he's really done to show like what kind of guy he is. I'm not saying he's a bad guy whatsoever. I'm just saying that Chris Ballard is not going to want to deal with him. We have Julian Blackmon as a free safety. We have George Odom as a great backup safety for wherever we need and as a special teams player. Kari Willis, obviously, we talked about him a little bit earlier. And I think he would, if he really wants to go back for another safety, which I do think he's going to draft one for depth, he'll probably go in the draft. I don't think Earl Thomas is going to touch our locker room.
Yeah, and Earl Thomas wouldn't want to be a backup either.
No.
I mean, I don't think he would be. So I just don't think, from a culture standpoint, and then also just the role that Earl Thomas would have, I just don't think it'd be a fit. But appreciate the question, though, Ryan. I appreciate the question, man. All right, this one from Chris. He says, favorite available free agent, regardless of position.
Favorite free agent. That's a tough one. I mean, Chris Godwin comes to mind. I would absolutely love having him if he does obviously if they don't re-sign with him, because he would be a free agent. But then I also talked about him earlier, Allen Robinson. I'm stuck on these receivers, man. I know we have MPJ. I know we got Paris Campbell. Hopefully we'll re-sign TY and Zach Pascal. But I am stuck on having that one guy that Carson Wentz will just – I think it's maybe just me being a Colts fan and being a little spoiled. I just miss having the Peyton to Manning, the Peyton to Reggie, the Andrew Luck to Reggie, the Andrew Luck to TY. You know what I mean? I miss just having that 1-2 tandem. And it could be MPJ in the future. Could still be TY for Carson. But, man, Allen Robinson and Carson would be so nice together.
See, I'm going Aquara. I'm gonna figure it out, especially if the Colts were to bring him in. I'll have to figure it out. I'm thinking him or Lawson. I just really think edge is so important for your defense, and if you can get a Pro Bowl player at edge in free agency, you don't have to address it in the draft. That would solve so many issues for you. So I would like one of those guys. I think those would be great. And that's the question that Mario's asking next. He's saying, I think we sign one of those guys. He says, I personally don't want to re-sign Autry or Houston. And I think they're too old, and we need some young blood at edge. He said, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, as much as I do want those guys because I love having my team, I mean, if you've watched any of these videos, you know that I just love this team, all of itself. I just want to keep everyone, have the same exact team and just add on to it, and not lose guys. But, man, you're right. They are getting a little older. Out of those two, I know Autry might have produced just a tiny bit more sometimes, and he was a little bit bigger than Houston. I think I'd want Houston because of his leadership, or the fact that he's been a captain, the fact that he's just talking to everyone before every pregame. I love Justin Houston. But man, you're right. If we had to get rid of both of them to bring in another like really young, really good pass rusher, I think I'd be okay with it. But man, thinking about that is really tough. It's a good thing. Excuse me. It's a good thing to know that, like as a fan, I would be upset for losing someone because of not only their play, but just because I liked them, or just because that they were good human beings or good just people to be around. It seemed like, because like watching Justin Houston and Aaron Rodgers at the end of that Green Bay game was just so fun to watch, like him be like a kid, like what we would be like we would do the exact same thing with Aaron Rodgers. It does suck seeing that, but this is a business, and if we were able to get one of those young guys, I think we'd have to take him.
See, I'm kind of like torn on both those guys, on Houston and Autry. And I get what you're saying about Houston, a great leader, but Autry plays so many different positions on that line. He can literally play any position, and he's been decently productive, right? I mean, I think he was second on the team in sacks this last year behind Buckner. So, I mean, say what you want about Autry. I mean, he's not like the most consistent pass rusher, but he can move around. He can play 3-tech. He can play defensive end. He can play just anything you need. So I think, and he's a little bit younger, so I think I might bring back Autry, but it would suck to lose Justin Houston for sure. Yeah, I don't want to lose any of them, but I do get it. Like you said, it's a business, and you gotta lose some guys, unfortunately, and gain some other guys. So if it meant that, I probably would be okay with that too. I mean, I would definitely be okay with that. It just would suck to lose those guys because they've done some good things for the horseshoe the last couple of years.
Thinking about it, man.
Yeah, I know. I feel that. I mean, even like TY Hilton, I hate even thinking the thought of him in any other uniform.
I'm not crossing that bridge. I'm not crossing that bridge until it happens. I'm not even thinking about if it does go away. I don't want to get my mind ready for that.
Nope, definitely not. We're not going to talk about it right now.
Okay, good.
Carl asks, he says, out of the past Colts players, if you could bring back one player to play in 2021, who would it be and why?
Oh my God. Okay. I mean, clearly, God, this is a tough question. What a question, man.
I know.
Okay. If we have this team right now, God, I mean, Peyton Manning. I can't. I would. It sucks because I would love to bring back Dwight Freeney or Robert Mathis because to fill the edge rush that we need, or bring back Marvin Harrison or Reggie Wayne, or bring back Dallas Clark, people that like could fill in the positions that we need. But how can you not say that Peyton Manning would be so good with this team? Mm-hmm. Even Andrew Luck, obviously, of course, would want to bring him back. But we have one of the greatest, if not arguably the greatest quarterback of all time, at least I think in the regular season. Tom Brady clearly kind of owns that whole all-time GOAT list. But regular season, Peyton Manning's the guy. So I think I got to go Peyton Manning. What about you, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, Peyton's the obvious choice. But I do like one of those edge rushers. Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis, that would just solve so much for you.
Yeah.
Your defense would be insane. I don't know. It's tough for me because, Mathis was like, he was a Colt longer, and people probably like Mathis more than they like Freeney. But Freeney was just a beast, man. They are both. I think you could pick either one of those guys. I'd be totally happy with.
I agree.
I feel like Mathis was slightly more undersized than Freeney, so It's like you think about the run defense a little bit. Would Freeney be a little bit better at that? I don't know. I mean, it's splitting hairs right now. Both those guys are all-time GOATs. So, any of those guys. You mentioned Harrison. Probably Marvin Harrison would be another one I'd be ecstatic about.
Yeah.
Or Reggie. One of those guys would be insane with this team. So there's a lot of good names. It's hard to just pick one, man. But probably one of those guys. All right, let's move on to the next one. It's from @MLGars5. He says, do you think the signing of Wentz helps or hurts Eason? And what is the bigger picture for Eason, do you think? Now, we touched on this a little bit already, Michael, about kind of the future of Jacob Eason, but let's just answer that first part of the question. Do you think the signing of Wentz helps or hurts Eason?
My first reaction is that it does help him, as he's only been a year in the system. We've only seen some rookie quarterbacks and some quarterbacks start after year one or sitting after 1 year be really, really good. And the names are like Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, only a few, right? And so I feel like he could benefit from learning more from Carson Wentz, learning a lot more experience from that. However, I'm worried about maybe the mental aspect of it. Maybe him saying, okay, I got drafted by this team, but I already have 2 QBs ahead of me. I've been a healthy scratch every single time. I got no preseason reps. I get some reps during practice. I get, maybe hear more and more as the season progresses. But like, then he understands. He's like, okay, I'm going into this offseason. Phillip Rivers is retiring. Jacoby hasn't been re-signed. He's not going to be re-signed. And then bam, Carson Wentz is traded. Mm-hmm. And so I am worried because I would be in his shoes. I'd be like, so they still don't believe in me. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. We drafted him for a reason. We pay him money for a reason, to be the backup and to hopefully be the guy whenever Carson does eventually get hurt. He will get hurt sometimes. We know that. We've seen him get hurt sometimes, like maybe a mild injury here and there, like some turf burn or something like that when he's running around all over the place. But we're going to need him when we need him. And so part of me is a little worried that it does hurt him. But we already mentioned this beforehand. Time will tell. We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, I think the good thing with the Colts is like they're going to give him a real shot to compete, I feel like. And it's not just going to be blowing smoke. Like if Carson Wentz is outright terrible, would the Colts potentially make that move and say, hey, you know what? Like this guy beat him. I don't care how much we invested in this guy. This guy beat him. He beat him out. Now, I don't think that's going to happen probably. But I feel like if I'm Jacob Eason, I don't feel like I've been like led astray or been given up on, because it's not like the Colts told him you're going to be our guy. And then they went and traded for Wentz. They said, hey, they even publicly said, right, we don't even know about Jacob Eason. So, I mean, he shouldn't be disappointed by that. You know what I mean? Because the Colts have very clearly told him where they're at with him. And hopefully he's a straight shooter and he understands that that's how Ballard operates, and he respects that. And he's like, you know what? Like, I get that. I'm going to continue to work, continue to put my head down. And you know what? Maybe in a year, maybe in a couple, I'll be the guy. But I got to prove it. It's just not like something that he's going to be given. So I think that's where his mindset should be. It should not be a woe is me type of thing. Mm-hmm. If it is, I'm a little bit concerned. Maybe some of those squabblings that they had about the draft last year in the draft about character, if that is the case, which probably isn't the case at all.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That was also me just putting myself in his shoes. Jacob Eason could be much different than me, like much mentally stronger than what I am. And so where he could be like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, I got this. I'm still going to compete. I'm still the backup. Whatever I am, I'm going to help this. So I which I do believe and think he is. So we'll see. Yeah.
That wasn't meant to be a shot at Jacob Eason.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No, that's just, I'm saying if that was his mindset, then, oh man, we have some other issues as well that he's got to work through. Right. But it appears it's not from all that's indicated. So that's great news for his front. But yeah, I think he shouldn't be surprised where he's at. So mentally, I don't think it's going to impact him. It only can help him, right? Because Carson Wentz, say what you want, he was playing like an MVP a few years ago. So he definitely has a vast knowledge that he can pass on to Jacob Eason as well. He's had Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz. So he's had some pretty solid quarterbacks that have done some stuff in the league that he's going to be able to learn behind. So yeah. All right. Last question here. I'm going to try to read this it's a long one. 2IVEEUN Stews asked, after adding Wentz, what say you about our record predictions here?
I know you hate this, but if Carson Wentz stays healthy, that's 12-4.
Okay.
12-4.
Okay.
You can write that down right now, and hopefully 13-3, but 12-4. Book it.
Okay. I'm going to be a little bit of a downer, not too much. I'm going to go 10-6. That's not too much of a downer. It's just less than what you had.
That's fine.
Because there is question marks about him. As much as I want to go 12-4 and 13-3, I just can't overlook last season. I just can't. But I will say the Colts have a very good football team. And if anybody can get the most out of him, like we've heard, it's Frank Reich. So you know what? That's probably 9-7, 10-6 is their floor, in my opinion. If Wentz is just outright terrible. Or if he's just average or whatever. But I think they could potentially be a very, very good football team, 12-4, 13-3, if Wentz can get back to even his 2018 form. Like, I think they definitely can. So, yeah. Well, right, for sure. Yeah. All righty. Well, that'll do it for this Q&A session, guys. Just a little bit over an hour here talking about the Colts. Hopefully we got all your questions down. I think we got pretty much all of them. If I missed one or missed a couple, I apologize. It's hard to keep up on some of those questions. Some of them randomly will show up and are visible on, my computer, and then some are not visible. So hopefully we got them all, but I think we got a good majority of them. And this was fun, man. Thanks for coming on, Michael, and talking about this and helping me answer these questions, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Like I said earlier in the video, we're less than a month away from free agency. The NFL draft's coming up. We are going to have you covered. We're going to be covering all that stuff. We're going to try to get multiple videos out every week. It'd be awesome if we could get a video out every day, but there's just, I don't know. We'll see. We might be able to, but nonetheless, we got you covered, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And for Michael and myself, as always, go Colts.
Go Colts, baby. Go Blue.